All right, we are going to take a special report right up.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas.
And good day. We are coming on the air with breaking news. Just moments from now, we expect a statement from U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. It comes just hours after it was announced that a second batch of classified documents associated with President Biden's time as vice president were found, this time in his Delaware home. There are growing calls from Republicans to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate whether a crime was committed, similar to what Mr. Garland did for former President Trump. The Attorney General has arrived to the podium. Let's listen in.
I'm here today to announce the appointment of Robert Hur as a special counsel pursuant to Department of Justice regulations governing such matters. In keeping with those regulations, I have today notified the designated members of each House of Congress of the appointment. I'm joined today by John Lausch, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, who conducted the initial investigation into the matter that I will describe today. On the evening of November 4th, 2022, the National Archives Office of Inspector General contacted a prosecutor at the Department of Justice. It informed him that the White House had notified the archives that documents bearing classification markings were identified at the office of the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, located in Washington, D.C. That office was not authorized for storage of classified documents. The prosecutor was also advised that those documents had been secured in an archives facility. On November 9th, the FBI commenced an assessment consistent with standard protocols to understand whether classified information had been mishandled in violation of federal law. On November 14th, pursuant to Section 600.2b of the Special Counsel Regulations, I assigned U.S. Attorney Lausch to conduct an initial investigation to inform my decision whether to appoint a special counsel. Mr. Lausch has served as the U.S. Attorney in Chicago since 2017. Before that, he spent more than a decade as an assistant U.S. Attorney in that same office. I selected him to conduct the initial investigation because I was confident his experience would ensure that it would be done professionally and expeditiously. On December 20th, President Biden's personal counsel informed Mr. Lausch that additional documents bearing classification markings were identified in the garage of the president's private residence in Wilmington, Delaware. President Biden's counsel informed Mr. Lausch that those documents were among other records from the period of the president's service as vice president. The FBI went to the location and secured those documents. On January 5th, 2023, Mr. Lausch briefed me on the results of his initial investigation and advised me that further investigation by a special counsel was warranted. Based on Mr. Lausch's initial investigation, I concluded that, under the special counsel regulations, it was in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. In the days since, while Mr. Lausch continued the investigation, the department identified Mr. Hur for appointment as special counsel. This morning, President Biden's personal counsel called Mr. Lausch and stated that an additional document bearing classification markings was identified at the president's personal residence in Wilmington, Delaware. When I first contacted Mr. Lausch about this matter, he said he could lead the initial investigation, but would be unable to accept any longer-term assignment because he would be leaving the department in early 2023 for the private sector. U.S. Attorney Lausch and his team of prosecutors and agents have conducted this initial investigation with professionalism and speed. I am grateful to them. Earlier today, I signed an order appointing Robert Hur as special counsel for the matter I've just described. The document authorizes him to investigate whether any person or entity violated the law in connection with this matter. The special counsel will not be subject to the day-to-day supervision of any official of the department, but he must comply with the regulations, procedures, and policies of the department. Mr. Hur has a long and distinguished career as a prosecutor. In 2003, he joined the department's criminal division, where he worked on counterterrorism, corporate fraud, and appellate matters. From 2007 until 2014, Mr. Hur served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Maryland, where he prosecuted matters ranging from violent crime to financial fraud. In 2017, Mr. Herr rejoined the department as the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General. In 2018, he was nominated and confirmed to serve as the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland. As U.S. Attorney, he supervised some of the department's more important national security, public corruption, and other high-profile matters. I will ensure that Mr. Herr receives all the resources he needs to conduct his work. As I have said before, I strongly believe that the normal processes of this department can handle all investigations with integrity. But under the regulations, the extraordinary circumstances here require the appointment of a special counsel for this matter. This appointment underscores for the public the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters, and to making decisions indisputably guided only by the facts and the law. I am confident that Mr. Herr will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner and in accordance with the highest traditions of this department. Thank you all.
Have you ever spoken to the President about this investigation, sir?
And we've just been listening to Attorney General Merrick Garland with some stunning news. A special counsel has now been appointed to investigate the classified documents that have been discovered at both President Biden's personal office, when he was out of office, at his personal home. And we've just learned a new development. There has been a third document. There's been two batches and now a single document, a third instance, if you will, of a classified document that was located and now turned over to the National Archives. So I want to get right over to Kristen Welker. She's live for us tonight at the White House, I should say today. Kristen, I got to ask you, we just learned all this news moments ago. Is there any response yet from the White House? And we know the president addressed some of this earlier today.
He did, Tom. You're absolutely right about that. We have reached out to sources here at the White House. So far, no response. But President Biden was pressed on this earlier today. The fact that the initial batch of documents was found 1 week before the election, and the White House failed to disclose that. Then there was the second batch of documents found. Of course, NBC News was first to report that. He was asked about those second batch of documents, including some that were found in the same garage where his Corvette was parked. And I believe we have some sound from President Biden, his response today when he was pressed by reporters on all of this.
But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents in from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas and file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document. So we're going to see all this unfold. I'm confident. Thank you very much.
So, Tom, just to put all of this into a broader context, this goes back to something that you said, right, which is that Republicans have been calling for the appointment of a special counsel. So this announcement today by the Attorney General clearly will quiet some of that criticism. They were arguing there was a double standard, that former President Trump, who, of course, had classified documents seized at his Mar-a-Lago resort, was being treated with a double standard. Now, the White House throughout this week has been very insistent to try to draw the distinctions. They say, look, this is a much smaller batch of documents that we are talking about, and these documents were never requested by the National Archives. But still, Tom, this does raise questions about how all of this was handled, because, of course, President Biden campaigned on a promise to be transparent. We still have a lot of unanswered questions here, Tom, and now the appointment of this special counsel. This is a very significant development indeed, and of course we continue to try to get response here from the White House.
And Kristen, to be absolutely clear here, there is the issue of transparency, correct? Because it has been news organizations that have been breaking the news about these documents, the first batch, the second batch, and now we've learned about this third document, a single document that was also found at his home.
It's such an important point, Tom, and I pressed White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday during her briefing on that very point, that President Biden did campaign on a promise of transparency. These stories are being broken by the news media, not by the White House. Now, the White House counsel's office did put out a statement vowing to update the public on any information. That statement went out before NBC News broke the story about the existence of a second batch of classified documents. So there are still going to be a lot of questions swirling about that issue of transparency. Worth noting, Tom, that the Republican-led House Oversight Committee has already launched an investigation into this. Not a big surprise, because they are launching a series of investigations into the Biden administration. But again, this is a very significant development here today, Tom.
Okay, Kristen Welker, stand by for us. I want to get to Ken Dilanian, who was at that news conference. Ken Dilanian, a lot of people are going to be reading about Special Counsel Robert K. Hur. What do we know about him?
Well, Tom, he is a consummate career prosecutor, a very accomplished guy. But it's important to note he was a Republican appointee. He served at a very senior post in the Trump Justice Department, the PADAG, the Principal Assistant Deputy Attorney General, it's kind of a job that makes the trains run on time and touches almost everything inside the Justice Department. And then he went on to become the U.S. Attorney in the state of Maryland for some period of time. But he rose up through the ranks as a career prosecutor, prosecuting all sorts of different kinds of cases, from gang violence to counterterrorism to corporate fraud. He's a graduate of Harvard and then Stanford Law School, where he was editor of the Law Review there. So a very accomplished guy, well known to people in Justice Department circles, and a Republican appointee, although many people who know him couldn't tell you exactly what his politics are, Tom.
Ken, before I let you go, and just briefly, if you can, talk to me about the pressure Attorney General Merrick Garland is under right now. He has an open investigation against a former president, President Trump. He has this new investigation against the current president, and there's also the ongoing investigation into Hunter Biden and some tax issues there. Talk to me about the pressure that the Attorney General has to be under now.
Well, he went some way to alleviating some of that pressure with this appointment today. But you're right to point out, Tom, that at the end of the day, in all of these cases, prosecutors may make charging recommendations, but the buck stops with Merrick Garland. He's ultimately going to have to decide, for example, if Special Counsel Jack Smith recommends charges against Donald Trump, Merrick Garland's going to have to decide whether to move forward with those. Similarly, in this case with President Biden. So it is an enormous burden, and people inside this building where I am do not like special counsels. They like to think that they can do this stuff on their own and within the confines of the Justice Department. So it's a big step that Garland has taken today, but he felt like the circumstances and the law and the facts demanded it, Tom.
All right, we appreciate that, Ken. I do want to bring in our NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos. Danny, I want you to walk us through the timeline here, because I think Republicans may seize on this piece of information, which we learned from the Attorney General just now. November 4th, the Department of Justice is notified about these classified documents. The FBI doesn't start their investigation, according to the Attorney General, until November 9th. There's a big day in between those two dates, and that's November 8th, Election Day. Is this just standard operating procedure? Is this the way things work, the protocol, or do you think they tried to leave politics out of this?
This is a question that at some point DOJ may have to answer for, because there was some delay. You can see it in Josh Hawley's letter that he wrote to Merrick Garland. He lays out this exact same concern, and we may never know. Merrick Garland may not give a press conference where he explains the reasoning behind that decision. But ultimately, it may be as simple as DOJ was investigating, and DOJ's policy is they don't come out and give status updates on their investigations. They investigate, and the only way a target usually finds out there's a problem is if they're indicted. And if not, then they may never know they were ever a target or somebody that was being looked at by DOJ. That's the way DOJ works, and that's how they're very, very effective at what they do, which is prosecute and secure convictions.
Danny, before you go, give us the legal ramifications for President Biden right now.
If nothing else, Merrick Garland's going to be committed to being remembered historically as someone who was not partial to President Biden, because he has not only appointed a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to do the initial review, and now he's appointed another Trump-appointed attorney, a U.S. attorney, as special counsel. This should give Biden some concern, but look, as we have to expect that special counsel on either side will be impartial and independent, truly independent.
Okay, Danny Savalos, I do want to go back to Kristen Welker, though I know you have some new reporting now, or reporting we want to get out to our viewers, that aides of the president were interviewed by the FBI?
And this is significant. This is from our colleagues Carol Lee and Mike Memoli, who say multiple aides who worked with President Biden when he was in the Obama-Biden administration have now been interviewed by the FBI, including Kathy Chung, one of his executive assistants. She was among those who was involved in transporting materials from the White House to his private office here in D.C. Not clear how many aides have been interviewed, Tom, but it's one more data point as we continue to track this ongoing story.
Yeah, a lot of new information coming out today. And of course, the breaking news that a special counsel has been appointed to investigate the current president, Joe Biden. Okay, that concludes our special report. We'll have much more this evening on NBC Nightly News and, of course, on Top Story tonight on our streaming network, NBC News Now. I'm Tom Yamas. We thank you for watching.
Or you're just joining us from a special report there led by our colleague Tom Yamas after we just heard from Attorney General Merrick Garland on those documents that have been found out in multiple locations associated with President Biden.
Yeah, 2 of his Delaware homes and, of course,